Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fruitful Trees. I'm so excited about tonight's show and our special guest. For those of you that have been watching my channel, you know that I like to speak about as many different fruits as possible and help people get their questions answered. And tonight on the show, we have Alex from Tropical
Everybody, welcome to
Farms,
and
you're going to pour your side there. So we're going to take your questions. So put your questions in the side chat, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. But I want to remind everybody, we are going to have a lot of people joining tonight. So Super Chat is opened. If you want to get your question highlighted, you can do that. We also have a few questions that people previously left on the other videos and Facebook as well. But our first preference will be the live questions, and we thank you all for joining us here live tonight. So to start off, let's introduce Alex, for those of you that don't know him, from Tropical Acres Farms. Hello, Alex. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Paul. I'm excited to be doing this, and thank you for those who are participating. I look forward to answering your questions.
Okay. Just wanted first, I want to tell everybody, prayerfully, the internet connection will go okay and everything will be fine tonight. But just bear with us. If you lose us for a moment or two, just hang in there and keep asking your questions, post them to the side chat. Alex, introduce yourself and tell everybody a little about your passion for tropical fruits and what you do.
Okay. Well, my name is Alexander Salazar. I own Tropical Acres Farms. We're located in West Palm Beach. I farm on about 8 acres of land that is owned by the Sturrock family. I lease it from them. I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to farm where I do. I started getting into tropical fruit as a hobby when I was in high school. Particularly, I was interested in mangoes. Now, I grew up around mangoes, so it wasn't like a real foreign fruit to me, but I became more interested in them in high school and college. Loved learning about other tropical fruits as well, so much that I kind of changed career directions. I graduated from college a little early, and I started a business in Loxahatchee Groves, which is out west of where I am now. I bought 5 acres of land back then, started farming out there, and I started leasing a couple orchards in the coastal area, and juggled that for a while, and then got it down to just working on 2 properties, and then eventually I decided to sell that piece of land in Loxahatchee. Now I exclusively farm in West Palm Beach. And that's where our farm is located. We produce tropical fruit, mostly mangoes, is what we're famous for, but we also grow avocados and sapodilla and mameys. We have a nursery as well that produces a lot of different kinds of mango and avocado trees. And so people are starting to learn about us in that respect as well. So that's what I do for a living.
Well, one of the popular questions we always get is actually, how many varieties of mangoes are there and how many do you actually have?
So cultivated varieties worldwide, it's probably around 1,000 or so if we're talking about named varieties, where we're including local varieties that are just cultivated on a small scale in different countries. In terms of recognition, like international recognition, via like publications and whatnot, the numbers in the hundreds, like probably between 500 and 1,000. Fairchild Botanical Garden was able to collect at one point close to 600 varieties. We grow 300 varieties, which is the most of any farm that I'm aware of, any privately owned farm. Fairchild's more of a nonprofit research institution. The USDA, I think, might have more than 200, like a number between 200 and 300 varieties. And then there's a couple other collections in Miami-Dade County that have, over 100, over maybe closer to 200, like Tropical Research and Education Center, Fruit and Spice Park. So, the number that's grown worldwide is pretty high, but the number that you would find searching on the internet is not as high. So, and then of course, every time you plant mango seeds, you're getting a new variety, quote unquote, a unique example, and at least in the case of the monoembryonic ones, and a lot of the polyembryonic ones too. So hard to give it a solid number, but it's a pretty large figure. So
wonderful. Well, we're going to get right into the questions. I have a bunch of questions that I could always ask you, but a lot of people have different questions. So the first question comes tonight from a viewer. They're asking, hopefully Saturday cold weather will induce more bloom and stretch harvesting time. So depending on certain areas, some people are hoping for colder weather, but I had some questions about, will cold weather hurt my mango? So what's your question? What's your answer about cold weather and growing mango?
So it's an interesting topic because mangoes are, I like to tell people that mangoes are a tropical tree, but a subtropical fruit. And that's because, mangoes get damage when they receive freezing temperatures like most tropical trees do. So they don't tolerate freezing weather, but in order to stress them to flower, a lot of mangoes require extended periods of cold weather, at least, multiple nights where the temperature, and when I'm talking about cold weather, I'm talking about temperatures below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So, or 15 degrees Celsius. So roughly that's the kind of, best area for, getting the mangoes to be stressed enough to flower. Now in the tropics, they don't get cold weather. So a lot of mangoes can bloom off of drought stress in those areas, but not all mangoes can. So mangoes with Indian genes or Pakistani genes or Burmese, anything from the subtropics are more likely to require cold weather to achieve a bloom. So the issue we have in Southeast Florida in the last 10 years or so is getting enough of that cold weather, getting those cold fronts to go down far enough that they give us a couple weeks where the nights are going down into the 50s or 40s degrees Fahrenheit. So what we've been getting the last couple weeks is a little odd. We're getting these cold fronts that come in for a few days and then they recede, and then our nighttime temperatures go back into, at least in our area, into the mid or upper 60s. That's not desirable because it kind of confuses the trees. It would be much more preferable if we got, like, for example, 14 consecutive nights where the temperature goes into the 50s or 40s. Now, in parts of Florida, they've gotten that already, and they will get that pretty much every year. But we're in Southeast Florida here in Palm Beach County, and then a lot of our customers and stuff are in Broward and Miami-Dade. So that's where most of the mango trees are in the state, because it's the part of the state that's least likely to freeze, historically speaking. But, we haven't been getting those cold fronts as consistently as we used to, 20, 30 years ago. And now we're getting some cold weather. It's great. But people in Central Florida or West Florida, it can be getting too cold. And so when you have temperatures getting down to freezing or below freezing where there's a risk of frost, that's undesirable. You have to protect your trees if they're exposed in those situations and they're not growing in a greenhouse that's heated or something like that. So it's Florida's like a climate of extremes. In India, this is not going to happen. The temperatures stay in the 40s and 50s pretty consistently at night during the winter. We get these like wild swings, which can confuse the trees. And if it's cold enough, it damages the trees and damages the blossoms and the fruit too. So hopefully here, at least, it will stay above the level where we won't get a frost and frost damage. So we'll see what happens. We'll be preparing for it to some degree.
Well, for one night next week or on this weekend, it's supposed to hit freezing. So can damage actually be done on one night of freezing weather? Or
absolutely, just an hour of temperatures at 32 degrees Fahrenheit can damage foliage and stems on young trees. Flowers and small fruit flowers can start to get damaged when the temperature hits the mid 30s from what I've seen. It will cause the pollen to staminate. If you get down close to freezing, the embryos and the small fruit will abort, and then you end up with a lot of dropped fruit, that gets upsized off the tree. So temperatures in the 30s really are not desirable, but like when you get to freezing level, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when you start to see actual damage to the trees themselves. And then you've got a more serious problem, because if you lose blossoms or little fruits, the tree can still flower again, and oftentimes will, assuming that there's still some cold weather to be had left in the winter. And I'm sure there is. But if you get foliage damaged, or if you get stems that get killed back, then you've got a more serious long-term issue. So, yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully we don't get to that cold here, Paul. Hopefully I think the projection for West Palm is like 37 or 36. That's pretty cold. I mean, that's the coldest it's been in a very long time. So I imagine we will see some frost here and there. I just hope that we don't see foliar damage. I can live with some burned flowers or some lost small fruit. I do have a lot of fruit on my trees right now that's developing. Hopefully that doesn't get damaged. We'll see. It's supposed to be kind of windy, and the wind helps prevent frost from occurring. But on another level, you have to be concerned with it desiccating your trees if it's real cold and it's real windy. So you need to make sure you water your trees, especially if you have young trees, before the freeze occurs. So,
okay. So the next question is a completely different topic. Is what is your favorite mango?
My favorite mango is sweet tart. A lot of people, by the way, will answer that question by saying it's the one in my hand or whatever. I feel that's a cop-out. I do have a favorite mango. I grow 300 of them, but my favorite mango is sweet tart. I mean, now at any given moment, I can list off a bunch that are my favorites, in my top 10 or 20 or whatever. But sweet tart is pretty consistently my number one. It is not my favorite tree. And if I could do it all over again, I would have planted a lot less of them. I didn't even plant a sweet tart in my backyard, for perspective. But it is my favorite mango. It is extremely consistent, one of the best, really complex. I just love it. So,
okay, and that's subjective. Each person has their own taste buds,
sure.
But a lot of people do like sweet tart.
Yeah,
okay, another question is, somebody says, how is it possible to breed mangoes through cross-pollination when there are so many small flowers on the one spike?
Well, okay, so most of those flowers are not going to produce a fruit, obviously. Only a small number of them will. Cross-pollination, though, is something that's going to occur on a lot of the flowers just from insects visiting the flowers and depositing pollen from another tree or even the same tree, because a lot of them can self-pollinate. In terms of people doing it, it can be done by hand. It has to be done very delicately. I think there might even be videos on YouTube about it, or at least on the internet somewhere. They've done it in Australia a little bit. David Sturrock, when he bred mangoes at the property that we currently farm in West Palm, actually tied branches together and labeled the branches for what he thought the cross was, so that when they produced the fruit, he could say, okay, this is a hybrid of this and this, hopefully. But you don't really know unless you actually genetically test them. Once they actually produce seedlings, you can actually smell the aroma of the leaves, and it can give you a hint as to what the parent might have been. But it's amazing, pollen can move pretty far. Insects can take pollen all across an orchard. So you don't really know for sure unless you genetically test them and look at their DNA, which you can't really just, go to the store and do that or something like that. The USDA has done pedigree analysis on mango. They've done it in other research facilities too. But in terms of breeding them and hand pollinating them, it can be done. It's tricky with mango because the flowers are very small. So,
okay. Another question is, what resources can we use to find out the growth habits of different cultivars? And somebody says they've used your website nonstop, but sometimes the growth habits are missing.
Well, if you're curious about growth habit and you're looking at our website and there's information missing, sometimes it's because I just haven't had an opportunity to evaluate the growth habit. Maybe I only have one tree of it and it's a top work or something, and I want to be a little more sure about what I feel its growth habit is before I comment on it, because I don't want somebody to think that a tree is a dwarf or something like that, or not a very vigorous tree, and it turns out actually it's a pretty vigorous grower. So we want to be accurate. If there's something you're curious about and you want to ask, you can always reach out to us and ask what the growth habit is like of that variety, and we'll tell you whatever we know. In terms of finding other information on the internet, I'm not sure where to steer you because there's a lot of misinformation about the vigor of varieties. I'll give you an example actually of that. The Lancetilla mango for a long time was promoted as like a small compact tree or a dwarfish mango or something like that, or a condo mango, I guess. It couldn't be further from the truth. Yet there are still people who ask us for that variety for that reason, because they find that information online on certain websites. So I can't, unfortunately, steer you in another direction beyond our own website, at least that I feel confident in. But if you want to know, you can always reach out to mango growers, not just me, okay? There's other growers, obviously, on the internet, and they can give you their opinion if they have experience growing it. So that would be my, if you can't find that information on a website, reach out to somebody who might know, or us, whatever. So.
Yes, and I just want to remind everybody watching that not only does Tropical Acres Farms have those 300 different varieties, but during mango season, they have them for sale to the public, those mangoes and the trees for the most part. So definitely taste as many varieties as you can, and it's a great resource. So I just want to remind you, you can get them from the website as well, and will come directly to the farm. Now, it's not just mangoes you sell there, you sell other tropical fruits. And another question now is, can you tell more about the season and growth habits of Thomas Zappadilla?
Okay, so Thomas Zappadilla is a variety that we selected at the farm in West Palm. It was planted by Thomas Sturrock, probably in the early 1960s, I guess, as a seedling, we're pretty sure. The original tree is pretty old, obviously, at this point, given when it was planted. So judging the growth habit off of that tree wouldn't have been very accurate, I suppose, but we've planted out Thomas trees. I would say it's a fairly vigorous Zappadilla, kind of a vertical growth habit. Would not compare it to something like a Silas Wood or a Maycock, or even an Alano. It's probably a little more vigorous than those. What was the other part of the question?
There's just the season and the growth habit.
Oh, the season, right. Okay, so the season of Thomas is spring. It is not a winter Zappadilla. So it comes in like March, April, May. And then it will often have a second crop in summer that's a little more minor. The main crop usually comes in March, April, May. So definitely a distinctly spring Zappadilla from what we've observed. And it's an outstanding Zappadilla. It might be the best we're growing. And I'm not just saying that because it's a seedling from our farm. It's very, very popular with customers in general. I've given it to people in the nursery trade. It's been grafted a little bit by Zoll High Performance Plants, and now is grafted by Lara Farms. We'll someday graft it when we get around to grafting Zappadilla. We've planted a lot of Zappadilla rootstock, and Thomas is definitely one that we want to get out there a little more. It has a very odd trait. It makes a lot of seedless fruit, and most Zappadillas don't do that, but this one does. So,
okay. Another question, it says, while growing mangoes in containers, using sand adds too much weight and makes it difficult to move around. What is a valuable alternative to sand?
Well, okay. Obviously, you can put like rocks, small rocks, pebbles, whatever in there to improve drainage. But that's going to, add weight in its own respect, even though it's not as dense. So I guess, perlite, stuff like that is good media that, you can put in a potting mix that will assist with drainage without having too much moisture retention. Yeah, I mean, we use sand though. Sand works real well with mangoes. Mangoes perform well in it. If it's heavy, I guess get somebody to help you lift it. Yeah.
So somebody just on the same note, somebody asked a question next. Need to know proper potting soil for mango seedlings and trees.
Well, it depends to some degree on what you're doing with them. I mean, if you're just starting them, pretty sandy mix works pretty well. But if you're going to be growing them long term in a container, you need some organic matter in there, just to help with some moisture retention to an extent, and supply a little bit of nutrients to the tree that they won't get in pure sand culture. So I would say something that's like a 50-50 mix of a standard potting soil and a coarse sand, like a builder's sand. I'm not talking about like the sand that they use in like a kid's play box or something like that, like on a playground. I'm talking about builder's sand is a different grain, but that seems to work pretty well, and it's very big. Some people will go a little bit beyond that and use mixtures of peat and pine bark and sand or whatever. But as long as you have a good bit of sand, let's say anywhere from 1/3 to 50% of the mix for drainage, the mangoes seem to do pretty well in potting mixes like that. So,
okay. Another question is, what are the best varieties to grow inland?
So inland, at least in Florida, that means that you're in a more humid climate. You want stuff that is more disease resistant, but specifically resistant to anthracnose and scab to a lesser degree. Because, of course, disease tolerance can encompass diseases that, like powdery mildew, for example, that is not that hard to control and is an issue even along the coast. So inland, I would say anthracnose resistance is the most important thing. Varieties that are good inland, because I grew them in Loxahatchee for years, so I saw quite a bit of what does well in higher humidity. Pickering, Floragon, Duncan, Glen, Valencia Pride, all have very good anthracnose resistance at the foliar. At the floral and small fruit stage, because that's when the anthracnose is going to do the most damage. What else? I mentioned Duncan, Philippine. What else does well inland? Sweet Tart actually was pretty anthracnose resistant. Fairchild does really well inland. CAC is another one. That's pretty anthracnose resistant, gets some powdery mildew, but it's resistant to anthracnose pretty good. What else? There's definitely others that I'm leaving off, but I listed a few there that span over the course of the seasons. Yeah, that's what I can think of right now. So
okay, I know you're gonna like this next question. Okay. Sassy Love and Orange Sherbet are difficult cultivars to find. Does Alex have them in stock?
Well, we're kind of back ordered on both of them, if I'm being honest here. We grafted a lot of them both in the fall. Sassy Love, we're the only nursery that grafts it as far as I'm aware currently. So it's, if we don't have it, you can't get it. But like a lot of, one of the options that we allow people to do is if they can't get something, can't find it in the nursery trade, they can place a graft order for it and we will graft it for you and we will save it for you. And then when the time comes that the tree's ready, you come and pick it up or we ship it to you. So if you want to get a Sassy Love or an Orange Sherbet, my suggestion is to put a graft order in. We did do some in the fall and I think we'll have some spares in the spring. So up to a certain point. So if you place an order for one now, you might be able to get one in May or June or something from us. If we exhaust that supply, then we will graft more in the spring for sure. Same thing with Orange Sherbet. We will have to graft more of that. The problem is that the demand for mango trees is so incredibly high right now. It's hard to keep up with. We're going to do our best this year to make way more than we made last year. I think we did like 7,000 trees last year or something. It wasn't close to enough. We're going to aim to do closer to 20,000 this coming year. So we'll see. It probably won't be enough, but there's only so much space we have for producing them on the farm. So,
wow. Okay. This is a weird question, but are mangoes good for goats?
Oh, I know they can eat them because I've seen goats eat mangoes. In terms of like how they are.
That was just a question.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's good for them to eat lots of them, but I know they'll eat them. No doubt about that. They will definitely
anything. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll probably eat trees too.
Yeah. Say that again.
I said they'll probably eat the trees too, not just the
fruit.
Fruit.
Yeah, right. So another question is a cold temperature, would that apply to the Zil mango hybrids?
I'm sorry, what?
The cold temperatures would apply to Zil mango hybrids? Question mark.
Do cold temperatures apply to them?
What you
Or
were
we're
saying
talking
about the cold temperatures, is that just for classic mangoes, or does it also include?
Oh, forgetting the flower. Forgetting the flower. Well, yeah, actually, quite a few. Well, some of the Zill mangoes, the new Zill hybrids, flower relatively easily. Some of them are very difficult to bloom. And when you consider when Gary Zill conducted his breeding project, it was over the course of the 90s and early 2000s. And so a lot of these seeds he planted in the early 90s. He might have even planted some in the late 80s. I don't remember. But most of them were planted in the 90s. And so, you know, if he planted a seed in 1993, okay, and it starts bearing in 1998, it's going through what our old winters used to be like when it starts fruiting. So a mango that's selected under conditions that are cooler than conditions it's later grown in can be misleading in terms of its productivity habit. So some of the New Zealand ones, like Sweet Tart, for example, needs a cold climate to flower consistently, or it's just not going to fruit every single year very well. So I think Sweet Tart's probably a mango better suited for the west coast of Florida or central Florida or even California. Bombay is another mango. Bombay is a mango that actually it's grown commonly in Jamaica, ironically enough, but it doesn't produce that well there. You know, used to produce okay in South Florida. Now we're crossing our fingers every winter for the Bombay trees to flower, because it's from India, and it's from a part of India where they get cooler, consistent nights. And so so some of those New Zealand ones, it just depends on their genetic makeup. Some of them flower pretty easily. Super Julie flowers easily. Sunrise flowers relatively easily, and I'm leaving a bunch of them off. But you know, there's a number of them that flower easily. But Sweet Tart is a challenging one, and there's a couple others that are missing my mind right now that have been a bit of a pain. So, you know, I don't know if I can say that overall they're any more difficult to bloom than anything else in general, because there's so much genetic diversity in Gary's hybrids. So, but you know, I could probably go down the list and say this one's difficult, this one's moderate, and this one's easy to bloom. But
Sure.
well, I don't have time to do that. So,
Okay.
if you have questions about a specific one, I can answer it. So.
Yes, and I want to remind everybody, for everyone watching, get those likes up, because it shows the video so more people can join. So if you're watching, just hit the like button. And also, if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to this channel, because we have a lot of videos with Alex and talking about mangoes. So another question is can you tell us some examples of varieties that do well near Zill's place that may not do well near Alex's place near coast?
Varieties that do well
at Zill's, but they might not do well at your place.
In terms of flowering, or just in terms of general?
He said near the coast, so maybe you're too close to the coast, as Zill's a little bit.
Yeah, I would say Sweet Tart absolutely is flowers better out west, because it gets more cold weather out west than it does at the coast. I mean, like, none of our Sweet Tart trees are flowering yet, and we have almost 30 of them. I think we have 29 of them. So I might even top work some of those beginning this year, depending on how they perform this year. But so that's one. What's another Zill variety that might do better out west? Well, I don't know. I mean, like the area that they're in doesn't provide that much of an advantage in terms of you know, trees being more likely to bloom. Actually, where we're located, trees flower relatively easily because of our proximity to the ocean. So like we get bloom in like fall on some of our trees, where people in other parts of the state get nothing. So I'm not sure that there's that much of a difference, but I'd have to really think about the Zill varieties in terms of which of the hybrids would do a little better out west in terms of their ability to flower. So,
well, how about things like a lemon zest that on your farm they just did really bad?
Yeah,
like,
lemon
right
zest.
near me, they're going crazy.
That's one. Yeah, lemon zest probably flowers a little better out west. I had lemon zest trees in Loxahatchee, and they flowered a little more successfully out there than they did in West Palm Beach. So that would probably be one, absolutely, that flowers a little easier when it's inland. So I can't recommend lemon zest because it has issues that go beyond the flowering part. But it'll probably perform better in like west coast of Florida, Orlando, places like that. California for sure. I know it performs better over there than it does here. So
Okay. Another question is, it says, Dr. Richard Campbell has stated no nitrogen for mango trees. Since following his practice, the quality of my fruit has increased. I don't even mulch around the mangoes, but I still do around the avocado. Any comment about that? Or that was just
so Richard's philosophy is pretty much zero nitrogen, although sometimes he might give you a different answer depending on the context. But we're pretty close to that. We do not feed nitrogen to producing mango trees. We do not do it. I don't recommend it. Mangoes have an extremely low leaf nitrogen requirement compared to other fruit species. It's around 1%. Most tropical fruits and fruits in general, it's several times higher than that. So nitrogen really doesn't provide a lot of benefit to fruiting size mangoes because all it's going to do is encourage them to grow more, often to the detriment of their fruiting, as well as to the detriment to the quality of the fruit. More nitrogen usually equates to lower bricks, more disease on the fruit. So, it's more splitting, sometimes more internal breakdown because too much nitrogen will actually cause trigger deficiencies of other elements that are needed, like calcium, which is calcium deficiency causes internal breakdown. So I've seen mango trees that were fed too much nitrogen develop calcium deficiencies, and then they get spongy tissue or internal breakdown, jelly seed of the fruit. Lots of issues from nitrogen. I will say this, young mango trees that you just recently planted, very small trees, do benefit from some applications of nitrogen. But once they get to fruiting size, we will not mulch them. We don't like leaving branches to decompose underneath the trees. And I've heard about farms in India where they don't want like a twig sitting underneath the tree at all. They'll take everything out from underneath it. So I think the Richard's philosophy in general is pretty good. I won't say no nitrogen because I do recommend it a little bit on small trees that were recently planted or whatever. But once they get bigger, you need to cut it out. So,
okay. Another question. What are your top 5 low/medium vigor trees and top 5 high vigor trees that are powdery, mildew, and BBS resistant?
That's a lot of requirements there, right? Okay. Low and medium vigor, right? Or no, low and high. Was it low and high?
What are your top 5 low, medium vigor trees and your top 5 high vigor trees that are powdery, mildew, and BBS resistant?
Okay, low vigor, Pickering for sure. Pickering is resistant to everything, including powdery mildew. That doesn't mean it can't get it. It just means it's resistant, so it doesn't get as much of it. Fairchild, low vigor tree. They're small trees. They don't get much powdery mildew or anthracnose or BBS. They don't get BBS. So that's another one. Honeykiss, very low vigor tree for the most part. Does not have issues with powdery mildew for us at all. Totally resistant to BBS. So that's 3 right there that are low vigor. Angie, very resistant to powdery mildew, very resistant to bacterial spot, very manageable tree. I'm going to be leaving out some others. There's one that we grow called Saigon that's very impressive in terms of its disease resistance and very dwarf. It's David Fairchild's original Saigon, supposedly. We tried to promote that a little bit. I think that's a very interesting dwarfish variety that's resistant to that stuff. Sassy Love, very compact tree, and we've got 4 of them. Very resistant to powdery mildew and bacterial black spot. So that's a great one in terms of size of the tree and disease resistance. I'll name a couple high vigor ones because that was included. Sunrise, very resistant to a lot of stuff, including powdery mildew and BBBS. Valencia Pride. Valencia Pride handles the diseases real well. It's a very vigorous tree. CAC kind of gets powdery mildew, but it's very resistant to bacterial spot. Usually the powdery mildew on CAC doesn't destroy its crop the way it can on some other cultivars. Anyway, very vigorous tree. What else is resistant to bacterial spot and powdery mildew and is a high vigor variety? I know I'm going to leave stuff out here. ST Maui is super vigorous. Doesn't do too bad on any of the diseases, at least not powdery mildew and bacterial spot. No, that's what's coming to mind right now. So,
Yeah.
so I listed a few there.
Yeah, I know you told me, and I don't know, Duncan, right? You told me that. So
Duncan's not super vigorous. That's like a moderate to low vigor tree, actually. So that would maybe go on the list, except that it's a little more vigorous than the ones that I mentioned. I think it's probably similar vigor level to Angie. Duncan is extremely disease resistant. It's resistant to pretty much everything. Even when it gets powdery mildew, it sets so much fruit it doesn't matter. So although we do try to control the powdery mildew on it, it doesn't really get bacterial spot. Very anthracnose resistant. So if you're inland, Duncan is a good performer and a good choice if you like the Philippine type flavor, which is what it has, Philippine flavor.
sure. Okay. So another question is, what fertilizers do you use on young trees less than 3 years in the ground?
So it's going to depend, I guess, a little bit on how organic you're trying to be. But palm tree fertilizer works really well on young trees that you're wanting to feed a little bit of nitrogen to. You just got to limit how much of it you're applying. I do suggest giving the trees micronutrient sprays as well to the leaves, which should not contain nitrogen. And then once they kind of get to a size where you feel confident that they can bear fruit without stunting the tree, which is an important consideration, you can cut out that palm tree fertilizer. Or if you want to use an organic, there's some organic citrus fertilizers that have a similar analysis. You want that, whatever fertilizer you elect to use, you want it to have trace elements in it too, not just the NPK, which is your nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. I suggest whatever fertilizer you use on those young trees, that the nitrogen figure, which is the first number in the analysis, should not be more than 9. It should be under 10, basically. There's like 8 to 12, 8, 3, 9, those kind of analysis. You can even go lower than that on the nitrogen if you want. You want the potassium number to be higher than the nitrogen number. But once you think the tree's big enough to be bearing fruit every year, you can stop giving them that stuff. You can give them a potassium fertilizer. Potassium sulfate works really well in supplying fruiting mango trees. Potassium, trees that are fruiting pretty well need a lot of potassium. It's often deficient in our soil here in South Florida. And I would continue giving them a micronutrient spray that contains those trace elements like iron, zinc, manganese, magnesium, things like that. So that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I know the next question here I just saw. Let me find it again. I even know the answer, but here I lost it. Let's see. Hold on, everybody. It was about the. Give me a moment here. We're getting a lot of questions. Please keep those questions coming in, everybody. And bam, bam. I read online recently, guava and centalone are the same mango. Since you have both, is that true? The guava mango.
Yeah, so that's an interesting topic. A couple of years ago, I traded some mangoes with Walter Zill, and I gave him some Saint Talone fruit because he had never tried Saint Talone. And he called me up like later that day and said, "Hey, this really looks similar and tastes similar to the guava mango, the mango I call guava." And one of his customers tried it as well, the Saint Talone fruit, and agreed. And I hadn't even thought about it up until that point. But I compared them and I'm like, yeah, they do look similar, but I never thought more beyond that. I did, a million other things going on during mango season, and I didn't give it too much thought beyond that. The thinking had always been that this the guava tree that Walter got that mango from, the one that he named guava, was a big ancient tree, really old tree in the Jupiter area. And very long time ago, we're talking about 100 years ago, they were introducing a lot of Indian mangoes to Florida. And so there's varieties that got put out in the world, so to speak, that lost favor, that people forgot about almost. And so I always kind of thought that the guava mango might have been one of those. And I think Walter thought that a little bit too. So when Walter suggested that, it kind of entered it into my mind. Well, fast forward to this last year, something caused me to remember that conversation I had with Walter. And I started comparing the trees a little more closely. And I started to realize that the Saint Helene and the guava had the exact same foliage, the exact same fruit, the exact same flavor, the same sometimes polyembryonic seeds, sometimes monoembryonic. And then I started looking at pictures of Saint Helene on the internet just to confirm that our tree was indeed a Saint Helene, because I was pretty sure it was because of the source. And it occurred to me that it was the same mango. And I told Walter about it. Walter came to the farm to visit at the end of the mango season, and I showed him the two trees, and he said, yep, that's pretty much, this looks like the same mango. So what I think happened was, a long time ago, somebody brought a St. Helene tree somehow, some way, and planted it in the Jupiter area. And but I'm 99 point something percent confident that St. Helene and guava are the same. We are now propagating it as the same mango. We consider it the same mango. I think I might have edited the website to reflect that. So that's your answer. That's the answer to the mystery of the guava mango. I probably should have posted something about it on the internet, on Facebook or Tropical Fruit Farm or something. Yeah, there's the answer to the mystery that was there for so long, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Another question is, do you suggest I let my 3-foot ice cream mango tree carry its flowers?
Carry its flowers? Or carry fruit? 3 foot tall on an ice cream? No, that's too small. I would strip any fruit off and let it grow one more year.
Okay. Somebody says, I want to tell Alex that he is mad cool and very well spoken. Okay. And let's see. What is the hardest thing about being a mango farmer?
I would say the hardest thing, I mean, it's probably all the physical activity that I have to do during the lead up to the season and then the season itself, as well as have to deal with people. So, you know, I like being able to talk to people about mangoes and that kind of thing. And it's always enjoyable to me when I meet nice people that share that passion. But there's difficult moments too. I can assure you, if you have to deal with the general public, whether you're selling fruit or selling trees, you deal with the best and the worst. And sometimes the worst can stress you out a bit. And then when you're having to pull close to 90-hour work weeks sometimes during mango season, it can get stressful and difficult and makes you wish that the mango season was over. As strange as that may sound, but there's definitely stretches of the mango season where I cannot wait for it to be over. I kind of live for the off season during mango season. I dream about what I'm going to do when there's no more fruit on the trees and when I'm not having to check and collect budwood and that kind of thing. So I guess that might give you a little bit of a picture of what my life is like for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months out of the year. It seems to be growing every year. So that's what's hard about it. I would say the combination of those things.
Sure.
So
another question is,
I was going to say, if I didn't have to deal with people, then it wouldn't be as bad, I suppose. Go ahead, Paul.
Do Florida mango scions work in California? I heard they do not.
Yeah, they work fine. I'm not sure where you got that information from. Lots of people in California have grafted onto their trees using scions from Florida. So, I mean, we have customers, nurseries that buy from us, actually, buy budwood from us. So I wouldn't see why. I mean, there might be examples where people supplied budwood that was not in the best shape or whatever, and that might be a reason why it would fail. But otherwise, I can't see why it would be less successful in California. So.
Okay. How many varieties of mamey sapote do you grow? And do you have a suggestion for a small tree with excellent fruit?
Yeah, at one point I think we had like 16 or something like that. Now we lost a couple. A few of them died. So I think we're down to maybe like a dozen or something, or different kinds of mamey. Maybe it's 13. I don't remember. In terms of small mamey trees, there's a couple. Viejo is a pretty small, compact mamey, very precocious. Starts making mamey fruit at a younger age than most mamey will or can. There's another one called Excalibur, which was propagated by the Excalibur nursery. I don't know if they still make that one or not, but it's a very compact tree. Also seems to be kind of precocious too. And then there's one that the Zill nursery put out a couple of years called Pumpkin Pie. And ours was growing real dense and compact, and then it died. So I have to get another pumpkin pie. But those are the mameys that I've observed that are kind of smaller trees. Magana is not too bad, kind of a spreading growth habit as opposed to a vertical one. So those are the ones that I would suggest for people that are wanting smaller trees compared to the more vigorous mameys. And there's quite a few vigorous mameys. So.
And somebody says, what is the best time to graft mamey sapote?
Oh, probably in the spring and fall, I guess. I don't think they graft that well in the winter, but Julian, I would defer to Julian Lair on that because I don't have a lot of experience grafting mamey. I've done it before, but ideal, I would say you want the weather to be warm, but maybe not blazing hot. So I would say spring and fall, but Julian could probably provide more insight because he grafts a lot more mamey. Now we will probably graft mamey at some point when we get enough production of the fruit and rootstock and everything, because we want to be able to share some of these varieties with the world, so to speak, but we probably a few years away from doing that.
Okay. What can help me grow mangoes better in heavy clay soil?
Heavy clay soil, you probably don't have to irrigate them as frequently as you do, here in Florida in our sandier soil where, it drains off so quick. Limit your nitrogen inputs. You're probably going to have higher nitrogen in the soil than we do here. If you do get wet, because I don't know what their humidity is like. If they are dry, then they don't have to worry too much about anthracnose. But if they're wet and they're clay, they're going to have probably more anthracnose and maybe even things like scab and phomopsis and stuff like that too. So, but I would say you probably don't need to water your trees as much as you think, even if you're in a drier climate. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So.
Okay. Why is my mango graft staying green for a month or more but never put leaves, then fall after?
Then fall after?
So the grafts are staying green for a month and they never put out leaves and then they fall off, I guess.
Okay, so sometimes a graft will bind, the union will bind, the cambial tissue will callus, and then it doesn't push because the tree is not in a state of active growth, or it's pushing growth out of other parts of the tree. So one thing you want to make sure is that you, if you grafted to like a stump, okay, that you don't have shoots coming out competing with it below the graft, because otherwise it will oftentimes just stay green and not push. If it's on a rootstock that you grafted to, it's going to depend on what kind of graft you did. So if you did like a veneer graft, for example, and your graft's not pushing, I would suggest cutting back some of the leaves on the rootstock to try to excite the tree into flushing out vegetative growth. So other than that, if it is a rootstock in a pot, make sure you're watering it and giving it some fertilizer too to help push it along. You do want it to grow. So.
Okay. Can you provide information about the day avocado, like favor profile, season?
Day is, yeah. Okay. Day is a Guatemalan Mexican hybrid, has a pretty rich, relatively high oil for Florida avocado texture. On a good day, no pun intended, the day avocado has an oil content range in the teens in terms of percentage. That's good enough, at least most of the time, that you can make guacamole with it, and the guacamole will hold up. It won't turn soupy like it will when you use a lot of the Florida avocados, the big green, West Indian hybrids. Very cold hardy. It's hardy down about 22 degrees Fahrenheit as a mature tree, low 20s, I would say. Not as hardy as like a Mexicola or like a pure Mexican type, because it's not a very vigorous tree. They can be kept pretty small. It's probably one of our least vigorous avocado trees, actually, compared to a lot of the other varieties we have that are quite a bit more enthusiastic about flush and growth. Very productive. It's like a September avocado, September, October, that time period. I guess I've had them last later than that. I've had them make it into October or even November before, but we'll call it a fall avocado here. Ripens pretty evenly. Very thin skin, but not like edible thin skin compared to like Mexicola Grande or something like that, or Brogdon. Small seed. Yeah, great tree. I love Day. It's one of my favorite avocados for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of which, everybody, Alex on his website has amazing varieties of mangoes, and he talks all about them. But he also does for avocados, and I love avocados, and I've done so much research on his website. I don't know what place it has more information on different varieties of avocados than his website. So on his site at the top it says "We Grow." If you click on mangoes, it brings all the mangoes he has, and then it also has. If you click on avocados, he also has Zappadillas and stuff, but if you click on that, it brings all the varieties and has a lot of information on all of them. That's very helpful. So thank you for that service, Alex. That's great, big help. So yes, all right. So this next question is, how close in flavor is Sassy Love to Sweet Tart? And are your Sassy Love trees less vigorous and more manageable than Sweet Tart?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second part first. Absolutely. Sassy Love is a totally different growth habit than Sweet Tart. Less vigorous, doesn't flush as frequently. It's more of a spreading habit, and it's more compact. Sweet Tart's definitely more vertically oriented, more vigorous, more likely to skip a year. Doesn't start fruiting as young of an age as Sassy Love. In terms of the flavor, I would say prior to this last year, our Sassy Love fruit had tasted very similar to Sweet Tart. Like almost you would have issues trying to distinguish them next to one another if you were tasting them. This last year was the first time I ever had Sassy Loves that tasted a little closer to the zinc mango, which is probably one of its parents. So, but prior experience would suggest that it's pretty similar to Sweet Tart. Pretty similar. In a very good way, because Sweet Tart is an awesome mango, and Sassy Love's incredible. Sassy Love is one of the best hybrids that came out of Gary's breeding project. I mean, some people might disagree or whatever, but if you like that Indo-Chinese hybrid flavor, you're going to love Sassy Love. It's wonderful. So.
Okay. The next question is, how good is the Maria Black Avocado? Is it true that it tends to be a small tree?
No idea. I don't grow it. We grow like 45 different kinds of avocados or something like that. We don't have much space to plant any more avocados. And if we do, that would not be high on the list because like we're interested in growing like Pinkerton and Reed and some other things. So I'm not the one to ask. Somebody else that's growing it can tell you more information about it.
Well, I can tell you, I've tasted it and they tasted wonderful. The person I know who's growing it says you can keep it smaller, and he has been successful at that. Now, I know the nursery where he gets them from, some people there, they've said it's a dwarf-sized tree, but then other times I've called up and they said that's not true. So I've heard mixed reports about that. But I know somebody who's top worked another tree and put that on it, and it produces really well and it tastes nice. So, but I haven't grown mine, so I'll see how it is. Mine's growing, mine's small. So let's see. If you could plant 5 mango cultivars in your yard just for your consumption, what would they be?
Good question. I think I'd probably want them all to be different flavor groups. So I'd probably avoid redundancy with flavor. And I like stuff that I don't have to, uh, if for whatever reason I can't spray it or whatever, I'm not going to have it skip years or something like that. I think I'd plant Pickering for classic flavor. I'd probably plant Angie. I mean, I have planted it in my yard for Indian Alfonso flavor. For citrus flavor, I'd plant orange sherbet. And for coconut flavor, I'd probably plant Sugarloaf or M4. I don't know. That's a tough toss up there. Well, let's see. Indo-Chinese, I would probably plant Sassy Love or CAC. Sassy Love's a smaller tree though, so ironically enough, I don't have a Sassy Love tree in my backyard because I didn't have any that I could plant when I planted them. But that gives you 5 flavor groups, and it gives you a relatively extended season just by virtue of the fact that those don't all have identical seasons. So, off the top of my head, there's 5 right there that you would consider. If you want a bigger tree, then when I said CAC or Sassy Love, then I would plant the CAC. So, depends on what you're trying to achieve with size. But I like trees to be kind of smaller. I did plant a CAC tree in my backyard though, so I'm really high on that mango too.
Okay, so those are the 5 trees. Okay, in South Florida, when is the best time to graft this year with the highest probability of take? Is beginning of April too early?
It's going to depend on what our nighttime temperatures are like in the beginning of April. If they're in the mid or upper 60s, then go ahead and start grafting. It's not the ideal time yet. You want those nighttime temperatures to be in the 70s. Daytime temperatures should be in the 80s. And of course, we get that in our later spring, summer, into the fall. So that's the best time of year. I can't say that one month is better than the other than that maybe in the wetter months, there's more humidity, might assist you a little bit in terms of getting the graft to push a little faster as opposed to the drier spring. But otherwise, like in terms of rate of take and stuff like that, we usually start grafting again in April, depending on, and even sometimes even late March, it's warm enough that you can start doing it. I don't like doing it before then though. So certainly not this time of year.
All right. Discuss characteristics of Bailey's Marvel, growing heights, top cutting to increase more flowers.
Okay, characteristics of Bailey's Marvel and what?
It says a growing heights, top cutting to increase more flowers, question mark.
Growing heights, top cutting to increase more flowers. Okay, well, all right, Bailey's Marvel. Bailey's Marvel is one of the best of the classically flavored mangoes. Classically flavored mangoes are mangoes that have like a peach, stone fruit, nectarine, whatever kind of flavor, which is what the old Florida mangoes often tasted like. A lot of people used to compare it to Hayden, but I never liked that comparison. I think it's better than a Hayden. Sweeter, certainly no fiber, very soft fleshed mango. Pretty vigorous tree. Bailey's Marvels can get very large. They flower relatively consistently. It's originally from Pine Island, Bokeelia, down in Southwest Florida. Really resistant to bacterial spot too. And fairly early season fruit. They get nice size too. I've gotten pretty decent sized Bailey's Marvel fruit. In terms of their fruiting, getting them to flower, I mean, like all you can do is just not feed it much nitrogen. Don't water it when it's fruiting size if you're trying to get it to bloom. Take good care of it nutritionally. Prune it right. Don't let it get huge on you. You can maintain a Bailey's Marvel probably between 12 and 15 feet in height in South Florida. I'm sure you can keep them smaller in places like California and more dry areas like that. What else can I say about it? Drawback is that the shelf life's not very good. If you pick a ripe Bailey's Marvel on the tree, you need to eat it relatively quickly, or it will get an off flavor to it. It'll go overripe and kind of nasty. And that's probably the main reason why I've never planted more than one of them. It's not a great choice for inland growers in like humid areas. It's a better choice for the coast. And within, let's say, 8 miles of the coast or less, maybe 5 miles on the east coast of Florida. So, and that's my thoughts on Bailey's Marble.
Okay. Do you grow East Indian mangoes, and do you like that variety?
Yeah, I have an we have an East Indian tree. Only one. It's extremely disease prone. It's not a mango for South Florida, in my opinion. It's adapted to the climate of Jamaica, which is different from ours. It's more dry. Here, it gets too much diseases. It gets every disease in the book. It gets anthracnose horribly. It gets powdery mildew badly. It gets bacterial black spot. But we have one. And we even in our really good zone for growing mangoes, we have to spray that tree quite a bit to get fruit from it. And it gets post-harvest anthracnose really bad too. I love the flavor of East Indian. Now I don't physically eat it. I juice it. I treat it like a juice mango, and the juice is phenomenal. East Indian is a West Indian flavored mango, so it has a strong spice component to it. It's a very sweet mango, but it has a lot of resin. So if you like that strong Indian flavor, you'll probably like the flavor of East Indian, but most Westerners don't like the fiber in it. So there's an alternative to East Indian called Lady's Choice from Gary Zill's breeding project. It was an East Indian seedling. The fruit don't get as big, but they don't have as much disease issues as East Indian, and a pretty similar flavor. So I favor that over East Indian if you're going to plant something that is like that. Like that kind of Indian flavored juice mango, if you will. And there's a couple others too that I probably favor over it if you're trying to achieve that similar flavor, but you don't want the disease problems that East Indian has. So I get more requests for East Indian than a lot of other mangoes just because we get a lot of Jamaican customers that ask for it kind of automatically. But most mango farms don't grow it because of the disease. So,
okay. How many light hours would one need to produce high quality fruit?
How many light hours? I'm not sure. Certainly, the more light you can provide them, the better the fruit will be. If they're growing in a lot of shade or even a lot of overcast weather, what we've observed is that if the weather is overcast for days and days on end, even if it's not wet, it can sap the bricks from maturing fruit. So I'd have to think about that in terms of the number of hours that you need to get good quality mangoes. That are really sweet and high bricks, but the more sunlight you can provide them, the better off they will be, most likely. I'm not sure if they need probably some rest from the light to some degree, like some nighttime hours. I'm not sure in terms of how they'll behave, but there are probably people that have researched that to some extent out there somewhere.
Okay. For the dooryard gardeners who want the most variety of each of the main flavor profiles, what are the best recommendation varieties to grow at a home yard?
Well, I covered a couple of those earlier. And so it kind of depends on how you define the flavor groups, because you can subdivide some of these. But like, to me, there is classic. There's classic subacid. There's Indian West Indian. There's Indian Alfonso, which is like mangoes that taste like curry, basically. There's coconut, right? We have coconut flavored mangoes now. There's citrus, and then there's two different kinds of citrus flavors. There's the Burmese citrus, as I call it, which is mangoes like lemon meringue, orange sherbet, lemon zest. Actually, Malika is a citrus flavored in that group. And then there's the Gary citrus. So there's two different kinds of citrus flavor, right? And then there's the Thai mangoes, and then there's what I call the Indo-Chinese hybrids. So I'm not a fan of Thai mangoes personally that much, so I don't even have a Thai mango or Thai flavored mango in my yard. But if I was going to plant one, probably Maha Shinnok would be high on my list if I was planting a Thai mango, flavored mango. Indo-Chinese, I mentioned CAC and I mentioned Sassy Love. Those are near the top. in terms of varieties that I would plant for the Indo-Chinese hybrid flavor. And then citrus, I would go orange sherbet or lemon meringue, maybe if you wanted an early season citrus. For the Burmese citrus, if you wanted the Gary flavored citrus, I'd go with orange essence or Seacrest. Indian Alfonso, I favor Angie. Classic Pickering probably, but you might group that in the coconut group too. It depends on who you ask. Classic Subacid, I really like Carla. That's a mango from Gary Zill's breeding program that's got a terrific classic subacid flavor. So that means it's got a more of an acid component than like the kind of mango like that the old school Hayden type flavors had. And then what did I leave out? Coconut, Sugarloaf for M4. There's one that we've got that has a numerical designation, no name. It's called 4026. It's really impressed us. It's very similar to the Gary mango. So if you want a coconut flavored mango, that one's been pretty good, I have to say. So maybe more people should grow it because it fruits pretty easily. And then I think I covered all the flavor groups there.
What flavor group would the peach mangoes be in?
Peach, like which one?
Peach cobbler, juicy peach.
All right, peach cobbler does not taste like peach to me. Juicy peach does though. So juicy peach belongs to the classic mango flavor group. Peach cobbler is actually more of the Gary citrus group in my opinion. But it's a very rich, complex mango, so it's hard to nail that one down. By the way, I left a flavor group off. Indian West Indian. If I'm planting an Indian West Indian in my yard, I'd probably plant Sunrise. I planted White Peary, actually. That's a phenomenal one, but it's a little more disease-prone than Sunrise. So I'd say Sunrise would be Indian West Indian would be the one for that one, going back to the last question. But anyway, that's the flavor groups those two mangoes fall into, Paul. The peach, juicy peach.
I had a juicy peach and a peach cobbler this summer, and they both tasted to me right out of the can of peaches.
I disagree, but then taste is subjective, right? I feel like one of the things, just to go a little off track here, I wish that we could have more mango tastings that were done blind, which means that you don't know what the name of the mango is or what it looks like. And I think if you did that, you'd be real surprised at what people would say about certain mangoes. Like some mangoes, they would say, well, there's no, on certain days, like coconut cream, for example, you get people that would not use the word coconut to describe it, but then you tell them the name and all of a sudden it tastes like coconut. So, and that happens with other stuff too. So the peach.
Me and my neighbor did about 10 videos last year, a blind taste test with a whole bunch of different mangoes.
I watched some. Yeah. That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Some of them we were like, wow.
You knew what they were, right? So like.
No.
Okay.
I didn't even cut some of them, so we didn't know.
Okay, cool. That's great.
The biggest problem I had was, I mean, you can get one mango, cut it one day, and the same exact mango, just at a better time, cut another day. It's completely different.
You have to know when to cut them and you have to catch them at the right time. So that's tricky. But like, I've always wanted to do a tasting event that was, I like having ones where you know what they are, but I also think that to fairly evaluate them, people carry severe biases. It's incredible how biased they can be when judging a fruit. So when you do it blind, it's very revealing. I've done that to people before, and it's amazing the response that I get versus what their preconceived notion was of that mango. So
we should do that with you. We should come out with come to your farm and have you do a blind test and see how accurate it comes out.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
that'd be fun. That would be fun.
I mean, it's really comes down to judging it and rendering an objective opinion. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of fun doing that. Okay, a couple more questions here. We say somebody said I saw a video from Queensland where the Espeller mangoes on a large scale. Espeller mangoes on a large scale. Do you have any experience for this area?
I've seen espalier trees. There's one at the Naples Botanical Garden. It's a Julie mango, which makes sense because Julie's a dwarf on its own. The thing that they will not tell you about those videos in Australia, they are all using paclobutrazol. It is illegal to use paclobutrazol in the United States on fruiting trees. But they don't tell you that in those videos. They just show you these espalier trees and these small trees, and they're all using a plant growth regulator on them that we're not allowed to use here. And it's the most important thing that they use in those ultra high density plantations that you see overseas is paclobutrazol. I hate having to bring that up, but like it's true. And it's incredible that they promote this stuff as like, oh, look what we did, with these trees. And they don't mention that it had to be chemically induced. So,
well, why can't are they harmful chemicals, or do they just not like them?
Paclobutrazol is a plant growth regulator that is definitely a synthetic. It's not an organic chemical. It's made in a lab, and they use it to kind of dwarf the tree, as well as induce precocity. It makes the trees flower easier. And so a lot of the commercial growers overseas use it now, or almost dependent on it. They use other plant growth regulators, or PGRs as we call them too, like NAA, and there's a bunch of them actually, but the Paclo is the most popular one. It's toxic to the trees in too high a quantity, and a lot of commercial producers have actually overapplied it, and then it stunts the trees. So they never grow right after that if they overapply it and they don't know what they're doing. So, it's legal to use in the US on non-fruiting trees, on ornamentals. And there's actually a lot of ornamental growers use Paclo. But anyway, I would never use it on my mango trees personally, but, is it going to make the fruit toxic or something? I have no idea. That I don't concern myself with it too much. But if you want to know how they get away with that really tight spacing overseas, in a lot of cases, it's because they're using a PGR like paclobutrazol, and they might have a dwarfing rootstock, and their climate is probably drier than ours too. So I'm skeptical. Now, there is a guy that's a customer of mine. His name is escaping me, but he does espalier with certain varieties of mangoes, and I think you can do it with dwarf varieties or less vigorous varieties. With real vigorous trees, I think that's tough. So,
okay. On that similar note, now I haven't heard anything on this topic, and I figured maybe you might have heard something. There are only a couple of crops in nature that are genetically modified. Have you ever heard or in your talks about people talking about possibly genetically modifying mangoes in the future?
Well, I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm sure it could be. The mango, there is no GMO mangoes, at least as of 2022. Right. And there's a reason for that. The mango is a historically, chronically understudied crop because it's grown primarily in the warm tropics. The warm tropics is pretty impoverished. There's not a lot of research money to be poured into the mango compared to Western countries growing row crops and stone fruits and palm fruits and stuff like that, where there's been tons of research put into those, and we know everything about the soybean genome and everything like that. The mango genome, up until pretty recently, was not very well understood. And so there's been more research put into it lately. So now they've been able to genetically map the mango a little better, but we're still not at the point where there's any GMO mangoes out there. They still have to be produced the old-fashioned way and bred the old-fashioned way. So it'll probably be like that for at least a little while. I have not heard about any news about there being anywhere close to having a GMO mango.
Well, that's good news. Okay. What variety grows well in California?
Anything really vigorous. So varieties that I know do well there, Valencia Pride, Kit, they grow those commercially down in the Coachella Valley, at least on some scale. Sweet Tart does well in California, from what we understand. I believe the Zill Juicy Peach and Peach Cobbler, of two that you just mentioned earlier, Paul, both do well in California. I know Peach Cobbler does. I think Lemon Zest does pretty good because it's kind of vigorous. There's other ones that I would like to try, like Bombay, ST Maui. I think CAC does well, from what I've been told. CAC is a pretty vigorous tree, so anything that grows, pretty quickly and maybe trees that are a little less likely to fruit when they're young. I would like to try northern Indian mangoes and Pakistani mangoes in California because they don't flower at a very young age normally. That's the problem in California is everything flowers all the time or very easily, and the climate's dry, so the trees don't flush a lot of vegetative growth. But those ones that I've mentioned so far are definitely a few. There's others, that are pretty vigorous here in Florida that I think are worth trying in California.
Okay. In the coconut category, I know Valencia Pride, Pickering, Sugarloaf, M4, and others. Pickering has so many positives and amazing when picked at perfection. Are others that are drastically different? Are the others drastically different?
Yeah, in fact, I don't know whether to put Pickering in the coconut category or not. I've tasted coconut in Pickering, and so have other customers and consumers, but then there's people who totally dispute it. Some of the ones that were just mentioned, by the way, like Valencia Pride, I don't put in the coconut flavor category. I think that's a classically flavored mango. M4, Sugarloaf have a very similar flavor to one another, a very different flavor from Pickering, and even a kind of a different flavor from coconut cream. I would say more intense coconut, almost candy-like. The Gary mango, the Pettigrew mango, those are related to one another. And, then there's the coconut that you find in the Julie. Julie can have a lot of coconut to it. And so does the Dwarf Hawaiian. Dwarf Hawaiian has a lot of coconut, a lot of coconut. Zill 4026, lots of coconut in that for sure. But there is absolutely a distinction between like the coconut that you taste in Pickering and the coconut you taste in an M4. So that they get that from the Gary and the Pettigrew. Those mangoes were in the genes of Gary Zill's hybrids, and they imparted quite a lot of that coconut flavor.
Okay. What is a great mango to keep primarily in a pot?
It depends on your location, but Pickering, great for pots. Dwarf Hawaiian is great for pots. If you're in a more disease-prone area, maybe Fairchild could probably be grown in a pot. If you're in a less disease-prone area, you can grow something like Rosy Gold in a pot. There's trees that aren't really quite dwarfs, but you can grow them in containers with a little bit of pruning and not overfeeding them. Honeykiss would probably do well in a container. I mean, they've been real small trees for us. I haven't tried to container grow a honeykiss, but that would probably be a good one. It's a good productive tree. Saigon, that's a dwarf tree. I would say anything dwarf is good for containers. I'm talking about Florida here, by the way. If you're in one of these folks in California, Arizona or something trying to grow a mango in a pot, then I would not focus on the dwarfness of the variety, but I'm talking about for people in Florida's climate.
Okay. I'm going to mess this name up. Biscochinillo, the Kearney variety of mango grown in Okeechobee, Florida.
Biscochuelo?
Yes.
Let me look. Biscochuelo. What about it?
Yes.
What about Biscochuelo?
It says, is a variety of mango grown in Okeechobee, Florida?
That would not be a good choice for Okeechobee. Biscochuelo is from Santiago de Cuba. It's really disease-prone. It gets disease on the coast. So if you take it inland to Okeechobee, it's never going to fruit. It's going to flower, and the flowers are just going to get consumed by disease. I wouldn't grow that mango in Okeechobee. No.
Okay. Here's a fun question. If you had an opportunity to name a new variety of mango, would you name it after your mother, wife, or something else?
Would I name it after my mother, my wife, or someone else? Well, my girlfriend's name is Rebecca, and there's actually, and I call her Becky, and there's actually a Becky mango, but it wasn't named after her. I think it was, it's from Homestead, I think. I'd probably, if I had an opportunity to name one, I'd probably name it after Rebecca because she's been such a huge help to my business and such an important person in my life. So I would say that would be, if I'm going to name it after a person, it would be her. But I could name one after my mother too, because my mother's name's Christine and there is no Christine mango. And there's other people. I like to name them after people. The thing is, like, we've gotten to this point where we have to give mangoes names of other fruits or candies or whatever. And it's gotten a little crazy. the old days, they always named them after people, and sometimes people deserve recognition. And I think it's a great way to honor them by giving them a name, giving the mango a name after them. There's a few crazy names I have in my head, for marketing reasons, for that kind of stuff, like the Zill hybrids have, names like that. But if I was to give one a name, it'd probably be after my girlfriend. So Rebecca.
Okay. What are the pros and cons of pineapple pleasure as a dooryard tree?
Well, the pro is that it's one of the best mangoes. Pineapple pleasure is one of the best mangoes that came out of Gary Zill's breeding project. I mean, just phenomenal. We get bricks in the mid-20s on pineapple pleasure, which for Florida mangoes, that's outstanding. Super sweet, super rich. It's a big fruit too, so you get a lot off of them, and they flower very easily, relatively easily. The downside for a dooryard grower, it is a pretty disease-prone tree for most people. We've done well with pineapple pleasure. I have to say, we get fruit from our pineapple pleasure trees every year, and we've gotten pretty decent yields. But everybody else that I've known that's tried to grow it has had trouble. I think it really has to be grown on the east coast of Florida, or I would hesitate to say California, because I think it's kind of a low vigor tree and it'll probably just flower all the time in California, but maybe there's people growing it and fruiting it there. A drier climate where it won't get anthracnose. Powdery mildew is easy to control on it, but anthracnose is I think the tricky part. So it's a collector's mango. So I distinguish between mangoes that you plant for fruit production and to have fruit every year, and then mangoes that if you have enough space in your yard for extra trees that you can consider planting, because it's not going to hurt you as much if they don't perform as optimally. So
Sure. Okay.
Pineapple pleasure is a collector's mango.
What do you think of Suva Marika mango tree?
Savannah Rica, right?
Will do well in South Florida. Yeah, they say will do well in South Florida.
No, it won't. So Savannah Rica is a mango from India. It's also known as Sundari in India, Sundari. It is a mild West Indian flavor. Imagine a Bombay mango if you've ever had one before. That's a lot more subdued, really subdued, like much lower bricks than a Bombay, which Bombay is actually a pretty rich, sweet mango. But that's the flavor group Sundari or Savannah Rica belongs to. From what I've observed, it's way too disease prone at the inflorescence and small fruits, developing fruit stage for South Florida. You can grow it along the coast where we are, I guess, but I wouldn't try taking it inland. So it's a decent West Indian flavor, but I think you've got lots of other options. We do grow Savannah Rica, and we graft trees for people that request it, usually folks from India, from southern India, because it's from the south. Unlike the central northern Indian mangoes, it does flower here pretty easily. I just think it's a little too disease prone and not exciting enough in terms of the flavor. So,
okay. Could Zill, M4, Little Gem, Kerry, White Puri, Lady's Choice, and Pineapple be kept at 7 to 8 feet?
well, that's a bunch of them, right?
Yeah.
Which M4 was that one of them?
Zill, M4, Little Gem, Kerry, Jahangir, White Puri, Lady's Choice, and Pineapple Pleasure.
That's so many. It's more than I care to go through, I think. Most of those can be kept at 10 feet, probably. I wouldn't try to keep them much lower than that. White Puri, you might be able to keep. I mean, like that's right on the cusp. Did you say 10 feet? I don't know how many feet.
They said 7 to 8, but you were saying.
No, no. Not in Florida. You can do it for a little while they're young, but once they're going to eventually try to get bigger than 7 to 8 feet. 7 to 8 feet is dwarf trees. You got to do that. You can do that with like pickering. You can do that with honeykiss. You can do that probably with Julie for sure, dwarf Hawaiian. But the other varieties that were just listed, I think that you're going to have issues getting them the fruit every year if you try to keep them at 7 to 8 feet, indefinitely. I think you can realistically maintain them a little taller than that in Florida. California is a different story, but.
Okay. In Florida, can we use any mango seed for rootstock, or should we use polyambaric or turpentine?
Uh, it, we use turpentine a lot. It does very well in Florida for a variety of reasons. In my opinion, in Florida, the rootstock does not matter as much as it does in other places. So I think you can use pretty much anything, but turpentine is certainly favored because it's very nematode resistant. It does well in high pH soils. It's polyembryonic, so it comes true from seed like 80-something% of the time. It gives a lot of seed too if you're a nursery like us, So I would say my experience is that in Florida, the rootstock is not as essential as it is in other regions. So
okay,
use what you have.
good. What A-type avocados flower in late spring, early summer?
Most of our A-types, most of our avocados in general are done by late spring flowering. They're certainly done by summer. I don't know. I guess some of the later ones, I think Lula is an A-type and it flowers kind of late because it's a late season avocado. What are some of the other A-types? I'd have to look at a chart. I can't remember the types as well with avocados. If I looked at a chart, I would say the later season A-types, if you can find, those are the ones that are going to flower later, usually. So
now I know it's helpful to have an A and B close by. It's not necessary, but it's helpful. But does it also depend the season when you have the A and B, or it doesn't matter as long as
it does. It matters when they flower, because if your A-type flowers before your B-type, then it's not providing any assistance, right, in terms of the cross-pollination. Fortunately, with most avocados, I don't think it's essential. I think it's more important to commercial growers that are, trying to get the highest volume of fruit that they can. But I'm not saying it isn't beneficial even to a backyarder, because I think it is. If you can plant an A and a B type that flower in relatively similar times, then I think you're helping yourself.
But if they flower at the same time, then they're most likely going to fruit at the same time, and then it's kind of
no, not necessarily.
Okay.
No, I mean there's avocados that flower simultaneously and have different seasons. So
okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So next question is which mango do you recommend for eating the skin?
Oh, okay. Ping has really good skin. What are some other, most of the classic Florida mangoes have decent skin, with the exception of Edward, has kind of a little bit of a bitter skin. What other mangoes have good skin? Bailey's Marvel. I mean, that's a classic Florida mango that's got good skin. Well, avoid any of the Indo-Chinese types. They usually have bitter skin. That would include sweet tart and, Philippine and Dunkin', stuff like that. Yeah, I guess the classic ones, some of the Indian flavored ones have good skin. So, I don't know. I haven't reviewed that so much. I guess I should start taking notes about skin in terms of eating quality.
All right, another question, fungicide question. How soon after spraying sulfur can you spray copper?
Well, I don't think you need to necessarily separate them, unless you're concerned about tank mixing them. But with the concern with copper is spraying open bloom with copper, you kind of want to avoid that if possible. But I don't think you have to practice like any kind of delay time between applying sulfur and applying copper, generally speaking.
Okay. Another question. Do Hayden produce every year?
They do for us, or it does for us. I only have one Hayden tree now. But yeah, it's a real consistent fruiter. I mean, it's native to South Florida. It's from Miami. It was selected in Miami. So it fruits very consistently for us. Big old Hayden trees that are neglected, not pruned properly, probably won't fruit as consistently, I guess. Hayden does have its share of disease issues, I guess. So, that factored in with lack of proper nutrition and pruning and everything, I've seen old Hayden trees that kind of alternate bear a little bit, but ours really consistent. So not my favorite mango, but a consistent fruit.
Sure. Somebody says, have you or anyone you know tried growing a Gwyn or holiday avocado in Florida?
I have not, but I know there's people who have. There's people down in Homestead that have tried to grow holiday, and I maybe Gwyn too, but I don't have those. I've never grown them. I have no experience with them.
Okay. And on the same thing with grafting avocados, says, do you recommend grafting avocados from similar regions, or can you graft differing varieties? Example, a hardy rootstock with a superhouse or a negro.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. In our experience, we've used all kinds of avocado rootstock. Mexican types are perfectly compatible with West Indians, and Guatemalans and the hybrids between them. I don't think it matters that much. Now, there might be differences in terms of how that rootstock performs, in different soils, but in terms of graft compatibility, I've not noticed any kind of trend or anything personally when grafting. And we've done a lot of avocado grafting. So,
okay. Early, mid, or late season mangoes best for cold weather zone B.
Zone what?
Zone B.
Zone B what? I don't know.
Weather zone B.
Zone,
it says early, late, or season mangoes best for colder weather zone B. So I guess what are the best varieties?
I wonder which zone they're in, because there should be a number before the B. Well, okay. I would say it doesn't matter so much. Probably the early season ones are more likely to bloom early, and therefore more likely to have their bloom damaged by cold weather. But I mean, they grow, like up in Merritt Island, which is like the colder fringes of where you can grow mangoes commercially in Florida. They grow early season, mid season, late season. Their season will start later. So I would say in colder areas, you can expect your early season mangoes to start later than they will in Southeast Florida. But I'm not sure that there's really an advantage over, seasonal type based on your climate.
Okay. Everybody, this is wonderful. I'm so thankful that Alex has taken the time to do this. Of all of you watching, please hit the like button and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And also, you can see Alex's website below the video in the description. Please go there and check out all those descriptions. And we'll take some more questions here before we end tonight, but hopefully we'll get to do this again and take even more questions. But continue to post your questions below the videos, because we can also do follow-up videos on those. So another question is, have you ever heard of jumbo quesar? And if so, do you grow it?
Oh, I'm very familiar with jumbo quesar, and it is a real mango. I do not grow it. In fact, as far as I know, nobody in Florida grows it, because the budwood that was brought to Florida by Fairchild Garden, under the name jumbo quesar, is actually regular quesar, not the jumbo. We got jumbo quesar from Homestead, from the Fairchild source, and it is regular quesar. It is not jumbo. The jumbo is much larger, and it has a distinctive hook pattern at the bottom of the fruit. And if you look at pictures on the internet, you will see what I'm talking about. I've never seen this fruit in Florida. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist in Florida. I'm just saying that I haven't seen it in any nursery that's grafting it. I question whether it's the real thing until I actually see the fruit. So beware of that. We used to have a tree labeled as jumbo quesar until we realized that it was actually just regular quesar, and but that's what I've observed from other jumbo quesar trees in Florida. So.
And what's your feedback on the quesar tree, disease resistance wise and growth habit?
I would say it's somewhere in the moderate range in terms of its disease susceptibility or resistance. I guess it's glass half full or glass half empty. It does better in Florida than a lot of the other Indian mangoes do. And actually, quesar, from what I understand, actually does okay in California too. It's a moderately vigorous tree. It's not a small tree. And outstanding eating quality. I mean, quesar has the Indian Alfonso flavor, but it doesn't get the spongy tissue problems or internal breakdown issues that Alfonso can get. What else was asked about it?
Just a growth habit. You answered it.
Growth habit. It's I would say spreading, moderately vigorous. Moderately vigorous. It's a tree that in Florida you can probably expect to keep around 12 feet in height and it'll still produce. You know, not a dwarf, not a small tree, but not hyper vigorous either.
Okay.
Not as vigorous as Alfonso. If you want something that's like an alternative to Alfonso, it's more manageable and more disease resistant. I think Quesar is great. The only drawback is that if it rains a lot when the fruit is maturing on Quesar, it will sour out, which will happen on other Indian mangoes too. So you just have to hope that you don't get a lot of rain at the time that the fruit is beginning to mature. So,
okay. Top 5 mangoes for Central Florida.
Okay, Central Florida, it would probably depend on your proximity to the ocean. If you're out in like the Orlando area or something like that, I would suggest growing disease-resistant stuff. So everything I mentioned for the interior, things like Pickering, Glen, Duncan, Valencia Pride, what else? Probably Sweet Tart, actually. I should probably be mentioning Sweet Tart. I've gotten so used to not recommending Sweet Tart to people in southeastern Florida. But Sweet Tart's probably a great choice for like Orlando or something like that because of your colder weather. You'll get it to bloom, and it's got great anthracnose resistance. Yeah, stuff like that. You know, I'm trying to promote stuff like Saigon and Sassy Love that's kind of not been grafted much. That's really disease-resistant stuff. That could probably do well in Central Florida too. CAC, that's a great mango that, you know, can do well inland. There's a few. There's a bunch. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I want to remind everybody, if you have not gotten your question answered and we don't get to it, please repost it below the video after the video post so we can address it at some point. We might not be able to still see it in the chat. We have a lot of questions. I know we don't have that much time because Alex has to get up and get on the farm early. But I don't know how much longer you want to go, but do you want to say 10 more questions? Or do you want to keep going?
I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Okay.
I can take more.
Okay, so here we go. All right. Let's see. What mangoes would you recommend for 9B California? You kind of already answered that.
I answered that one, yeah.
Yeah. Is lemon meringue still a good mango compared to all these new varieties?
Yeah, sure. Lemon meringue is still a terrific mango. In fact, last year in 2021, lemon meringue was one of the best mangoes we had all year long because we had a very good lemon meringue crop last year. Yes, it still holds up well. Is it as good as orange sherbet and lemon zest? No. I think those are superior. But lemon meringue still has its value because it's a very early mango. I mean, we get in the coastal area, we get lemon meringues in April. It's not uncommon. And certainly by May. You know, maybe a little inland, it's more of a late May, June mango, but it's not so bad with bacterial spot. It can get it a little bit, but not as bad, anywhere close to as bad as lemon zest. I'd rather plant lemon meringue than lemon zest. And it probably flowers a little easier too. So there's still value in lemon meringue. Don't think that it's been totally surpassed. If you want an early season citrus flavored mango, it's usually my first recommendation. I don't recommend it generally speaking. Like it's like if somebody asked me for one tree to recommend to them, I don't recommend lemon meringue because it has its issues. But if you want a citrus flavored mango that's early season, that's until somebody comes up with something superior that can fruit in April, May, you know, June, that's your option. So,
all right. What vigorous varieties have you had success dwarfing on Piva? Is Edward one? Question mark.
No, I have not done any experimenting with grafting stuff to Piva and then planting it out in the field and seeing how it does. Now, Fairchild Farm, the former Williams Grove down in Homestead, had a lot of stuff that Richard and Norris had grafted on Piva rootstock and planted out in the field. I can tell you that research done in South Africa has shown that Piva will dwarf a number of the old Florida mango varieties. I can't remember which ones. I believe it can probably dwarf more stuff with Indian genes versus Southeast Asian genes. So it probably has a better chance to dwarf Indian mangoes than Thai mangoes, for example. But beyond that, I cannot say that Piva will dwarf this and this and this. There's lots of stuff it won't dwarf. I will tell you that, because we've seen trees that were grafted to Piva that grew vigorously. That's something that Richard Campbell can probably speak to more, like individually, what Piva dwarfed and what it did not dwarf. So that's my thoughts on that. I still get people that have us graft stuff to Piva without knowing how it's going to do, and I just tell them, look, it's a gamble. So it is a dwarf tree itself. So
varieties of avocado to grow for year-round production in Central Florida.
Okay, well, not year-round, but you can get a pretty significant chunk of the year. The earliest avocados that are good, I would say, is like the West Indian types like Dupuis and Pollock. Those are like June, July, as early as June sometimes, but certainly by July. And then you got tons of options beyond that, for that stretch in between. You got things like Brogdon. By the way, when you mentioned Central Florida, now I think about it, the Dupuis and the Pollock are pure West Indian types, so they're going to have about the same cold tolerance as a mango. So if you're concerned about cold tolerance, then the earliest really cold tolerant avocados are Mexican types like Mexicola or Mexicola Grande. Those don't necessarily ripen very evenly here, but they will fruit in the summer. And they have excellent cold tolerance down to like 20 degrees Fahrenheit. After that, Brogdon is like a July, August, September avocado, and it does great in Florida. I mean, it is from Florida. It's from Central Florida. It's from Winter Haven, I think. And hardy to 20 degrees Fahrenheit or so. Day, we talked about it earlier. Day is a terrific, very cold hardy avocado. Amongst the later season ones, you've got stuff like Lula, Oro Negro. If you want the really late stuff, the latest stuff is like Choquette, Brooks Late. Choquette is a Guatemalan West Indian hybrid, so it's got better cold tolerance than a mango does, but it's not super cold tolerant. Brooks Late is like a West Indian type, so it's not very cold tolerant at all. So I would say, but you could at least stretch your season probably into January. So we're talking about from like maybe June with the Mexican type avocados all the way to January, maybe February some years. There's one that Julian Lara promotes that's called the Roani. It has not fruited for us yet, but supposedly it fruits in like February, March or something like that. But I don't know if it's a West Indian type or not. I think it probably is, but so cold tolerance in Central Florida is an important factor. Guatemalan type avocados, a mature tree, like might hit mid-20s and survive. It's a little better than a mango, but not as good as those Mexican types or types with Mexican genes. So like Lula and Day, for example, are hardy to the low 20s because they're complex hybrids. And then like Mexican types, it's 20 degrees Fahrenheit for sure on a mature tree. So.
Okay. What do you use to treat anthrose/black spot?
Anthracnose?
Anthracnose/black spot.
Okay, anthracnose, it's going to depend on how organic you want to be. And we try to be organic. So like copper, and then I like rotating copper. You should use a high-grade copper, by the way. The ones they sell at Home Depot and Lowe's are pretty low quality. I'm talking about like the Bonide copper and the Southern Ag. That stuff's very low in copper. Not very effective. But a good quality copper rotated with a non-copper. So that can be a biological fungicide like Cyrenate or Actinovate or something like that along those lines. And it could be a synthetic fungicide if you don't care about being organic. So if you don't care about being organic, there's a bunch of synthetics like Manzate, stuff like that you could rotate to control anthracnose with the copper. And if you rotate them, it's pretty effective. But the biologicals you'll have to apply more frequently. So anthracnose is tough. It's tough to control. It's much tougher than powdery mildew. So.
Okay. What about Jamaican black mango?
Yeah, also called blackie. Some Jamaicans call it green gauge, depending on what part of Jamaica they're from. I've had it before. It's okay. I don't grow it. I don't have access to a black mango tree. One day I'm sure I'm going to get one. I've had Jamaican customers promise it to me before, but I don't have much to say about it because I don't have any experience growing it. We had a tree that was supposed to be black mango that was grafted. It was sold by Fairchild Garden at the Mango Festival the year they did mangoes in Jamaica, and it turned out to be a Prieto. So if you bought black mango from Fairchild Garden the year they did mangoes in Jamaica, you don't have a black mango. You have a Prieto, which coincidentally means black in Old Spanish. So
Why do they call it a black mango? Is it actually on the darker side?
No, it turns green. It's like a dark green. It doesn't really turn red or yellow though, so I guess that's why.
Okay. The best Julie substitute for South Florida, more productive, comparable, or better flavor?
Best Julie substitute in terms of production is probably Super Julie, or formerly called Fairchild Ruby. But it gets bacterial spots, so I can't recommend it anymore. It's also a very vigorous tree, by the way. That would be a good one for California, though. Dwarf Hawaiian, probably. I mean, Dwarf Hawaiian fruits better more consistently than Julie does. And it tastes just like Julie. Then there's Juliet, which is a little anthracnose prone and actually tastes more like Carrie than Julie most years, or at least a lot of years. Other than that, what tastes like Julie? There's this one I got from Gary Zill. It's a numbered one that I'm monitoring, evaluating, if you will, 3-18. That's very good, but I want to see more consistency from it in terms of bloom. I would say Dwarf Hawaiian, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is, I hear a lot about the positives from you about CAC. I tasted CAC and it does not look the same as XOAI cat chow in Vietnamese videos. In your opinion, is CAC and XOAI cat chow chew the same?
If you Google cat chew, okay, and look at the photographs of the mangoes that they are exporting from Vietnam as cat chew, it looks identical to CAC. Now, there are mangoes on the internet of another Vietnamese mango called Cat Hoa Loc. That is absolutely different from CAC. There's no question about it. They are not; those two are not the same. But my suspicion is that when CAC, as we know it, was collected in Vietnam and brought to the United States, at some point there was some kind of abbreviation mistake made. You could very easily see how that would happen. So anyway, like a pot, CA, cat, chew, C or something like that, and it got shortened to CAC somehow. But I mean, go ahead, Google cat chew mango. You'll see some of these mangoes with stickers on them that are being exported from Vietnam to the rest of Asia. They look just like CAC, just like CAC. I mean, spitting image. So I think it's probably the same mango. The problem is so many Vietnamese folks that we have as customers, they love mangoes, but they don't know as much about mangoes that they grow in Vietnam besides Hoa Loc. So they're able to identify Hoa Loc, but they oftentimes don't know too much about the other Vietnamese mangoes. So we haven't been able to get somebody that has been to mango orchards in Vietnam and say, oh yeah, cat chew and CAC are the same. And there's a mango that we got from Excalibur that was cat chew, and it turned out to be the same mango as the Hoa Loc that they were grafting as well. So there's a lot of confusion on that.
Got you. Okay, so what about the Test Pollock mango? What's the characteristics of that, and do you have one?
Yes, we have Test Pollock. It's been fruiting for a while, and it is a Indian Alfonso type flavor. It is probably a hybrid, from what I've read, between Kerry and Turpentine. I would say the flavor is closer to Kerry. The fruit's very good. It's consistently good consistently good, and it flowers very easily and usually flowers multiple times. So we'll get multiple crops from it. My frustration with it so far is it has not been as productive as I would like to see. And that's because it makes a lot of male flowers on its blooms. And that's a habit that can be hard to kick. It doesn't have bacterial spot issues or other real bad disease problems, but the productivity has just been lacking enough that it's hard for me to recommend that over when you've got alternatives like Angie. Even Carrie is more productive than Tess Pollock. But it might be, Chris Wenzel has more experience with Tess Pollock than anybody else. And so she probably has a different experience with it than I have. She probably has more trees of it than I have too. I only have one tree. But I love the mango. It's a really good Indian Alfonso mango. And probably for a backyard person, it'll make enough fruit when it gets size to it, that a collector could justify growing it. We mostly grow it to produce new trees from it and whatever fruit we get. I hope that as it gets older, it might improve its production habit a little bit. So that's my thoughts on it.
How would you rank a Kerry mango? Somebody's asking.
How would I rank it? I would rank it very high on the Indian Alfonso flavor group list. But that's not the case with about 50% of Americans who don't like Kerry because they find it medicinal flavored or whatever. People from the Indian subcontinent, people from the Caribbean often love Kerry. So I have a high opinion of it. There's a few Indian Alfonso mangoes I would rank a little higher probably in this day and age, but it still rates very highly with me. I enjoy it, the Kerry mango, a lot. I just probably like Angie a little better. I probably like Juliet just a little better. A really good Super Julie, a prime Super Julie is probably better than a Kerry, but I like Kerry still a lot. It still ranks high.
Great. What is the grow rate of Zill 4026 and Nelson?
Zill 4026 has been a slow grower for us so far, but I wonder how much of it has to do with where we planted it because it gets a lot of micronutrient deficiency in that location. It's got a spreading growth habit though. Nelson spreading open canopy so far. I have never been able to find a picture of Nelson on the internet to confirm that ours is an actual Nelson. They have a Nelson tree supposedly at the Fruit and Spice Park in Miami, but I haven't seen the fruit on that one. It has a flavor that does not taste like a Jamaican mango, and Nelson is from Jamaica. So it's got like an Indo-Chinese hybrid type flavor, and it was really good. Last year was the first year it fruited for us. I was impressed, really impressed with it. Kind of a flat-shaped fruit, and decent size too. But I'm still learning about that one, honestly. So, yeah.
Okay. What type of rootstock is best for California?
Probably anything other than turpentine from what the anecdotal evidence suggests. Ideal would probably be Manila because we know Manila does well in California and works well as a rootstock, but relatives of Manila, we suspect will probably do well. I've had people tell me that Carabao works there, so we have shipped a lot of trees grafted to Carabao and Duncan to California. But we've tried all kinds of stuff, as an experiment, non-turpentine rootstock. But then there's people that tell us that a lot of trees do fine on turpentine, like especially really vigorous stuff. So I haven't grown mangoes personally in California myself. I have to go based off of reports that I receive from people over there. And nowadays, almost every other request from California is, what's the rootstock? Can I get something grafted onto something other than turpentine? So there's clearly a concern about that amongst people growing mangoes in California, because almost all the Florida mangoes historically, the mangoes that come out of Florida that are grafted here are grafted to turpentine rootstock. So we've grafted tons of stuff to non-turpentine stocks since it doesn't matter as much for trees grown in Florida, and since so many Californians want non-turpentine. So we've used a lot of different stuff.
Right. Do you expect Southern California mangoes to have less disease due to low humidity?
I would expect them to have less anthracnose and probably no issue with bacterial black spot. They get tons of powdery mildew in California, tons of it. So it's a big issue there. So you need to be able to control that. From what I understand, the trees in California oftentimes get fungus internally, like systemic fungal diseases that don't occur as much in Florida. So they have like issues with like phomopsis and other kinds of fungi that attack the tree there for whatever reason. But anthracnose should not be a problem. Scab should never occur. They probably get no sooty blotch or fly speck, which we get in the interior areas here. So,
Sure. Somebody's saying, I have a few mangoes growing on a farm in Jamaica, and goats ate off the scions. The rootstocks should be fine. Can I regraft them to one new scion? They are about 1 year old now.
yeah, you can regraft something where the grafts failed. Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Somebody says, please tell us about Raposa. Raposa.
Raposa is from Hawaii. Raposa is a seedling of the Irwin mango, from what I can recall. And the University of Hawaii promoted it heavily because it did well there. It flowered well. It flowers and fruits well in Florida, but it's a very mediocre mango to me. There's so many better varieties than Raposa. And then we discovered that Raposa got bacterial black spot and rot real bad, so bad that we were losing most of the fruit. So most of the Raposa mangoes were getting fungus and rotting. So we got tired of it. I cut this tree to a stump and I top worked it over. I don't really grow Raposa anymore. I don't graft it. I don't recommend it for Florida. So nothing special.
They also want to know about Himan Pazand.
Iman Pasan. Yeah.
Himan Pasan and Chulusa and Golfi. So let's do one at a time. Himan Pasan.
Iman Pasan is also known as Himayat in southern India. It got introduced to Florida under the name Alampur Banishan. So if you've bought an Alampur Banishan tree in Florida, you have an Iman Pasan. Congratulations, you don't have an Alampur Banishan. Has very thin leaves, pretty dwarfish growth habit, actually. Flowers very easily here. Fruits pretty well in South Florida. And it's phenomenal. It's a great mango. It's a really, really good Indian, West Indian, strong, perfumey flavor, very light colored flesh. Usually they stay green even when they're ripe, but sometimes in the coastal area where we are, they'll turn yellow. Has one problem. It likes to crack on the tree. And I'm not saying split. There's a distinction between cracking and splitting. It will develop cracks or fissures in the skin that often heal. And so they make it cosmetically look ugly, but you can still eat the fruit. Wonderful mango. I love that mango. We have multiple trees in the ground at the farm of Iman Pasan. What's the other one?
Chausa.
Chausa. That's a mango that's grown in Pakistan, northern India. I've never found it in Florida. I've seen a bunch of fakes. There's people selling them on the internet that are fake. I've never had a Chausa. Can't comment. It's supposed to be really good.
Guifel. Guifei.
Guif.
Fei.
S or F?
F is in Frank. EI.
Goof. I'm not sure. Not sure what that would be. GUI. I know of Govea. Maybe that's what they meant to type. Not sure.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe. Guifei. So
maybe
they're asking if it's grown in Florida, basically.
Not sure about that one.
Okay. Somebody says, I love the taste of turpentine mangoes, but do you know of one that is particularly superior to most others? I don't understand that question. Okay, let's see. A comment. Any info on? Well, he already spoke about the black one. Somebody's asking about pina colada.
Pina colada, like my thoughts on pina colada.
Yeah, the mango, not the drink.
Pina colada mango is one of the best of Gary Zill's hybrids. It's incredible. I mean, like, that's an experience mango. I like to talk about life-changing mangoes. If you eat a pina colada, outrageously good. We can get it to produce on the coast, but the yield isn't good because the fruit are small. They just always come out small. I wouldn't even try growing it inland. It's way too disease prone. I used to have one in Waxahachie, and I actually transplanted it to the farm in West Palm Beach. I got so sick of how it was performing out there. But wonderful flavor, really good shelf life. It really gets that pina colada flavor when it's like extra ripe. When it's regular ripe, it tastes like a dot, like a really incredible dot. It's actually a hybrid between dot and Gary. The trees are kind of low vigor. They're not, really aggressive. I have some interplanted between other trees as an experiment, and I was able to get away with it for a while, but now they're starting to grow into their neighbors. It's a collector's mango, and it's only for collectors, I would say, that are either going to spray the heck out of the tree or they're going to grow it in the coastal zone. It's not a mango for Waxahachie or, Orlando, something like that.
Okay. Someone's asking if you're going to do anything for your trees with the weather getting into the 30s this weekend.
We will probably run our irrigation on the nursery stock just to make sure that it doesn't get damaged if we do get lower than they're projecting. I do have the irrigation turned on some trees that have fruit on them and flowers, but other than that, there's not much I can do. Most of our trees are too big to do any kind of covering or even think about that kind of thing. So we just hope that the temperature doesn't get to 32. That's it.
Would it be helpful to bring some of my potted plants indoors if they're 3 gallons?
I would do it. That can't hurt, right? To bring them indoors for a night. So yeah, if you have small, tender potted trees, take them inside.
Okay.
And then your in-ground trees, water them heavily starting tomorrow morning. And just the next couple of days, make sure the soil is real saturated, and it'll provide a degree or so of extra protection.
When you say water them heavily, you mean leave the irrigation system on, or do you mean just get with the hose and stand there?
I would say make sure that soil is real good and wet. You don't have to leave it running 24/7 or whatever. But just put a lot of water on there and do it multiple times a day for the next couple days leading up to the night of the freeze. And it'll give you something. Other than that, if you are in an area that's actually going to freeze and it's practical to you, you can cover the trees.
Okay.
Build a structure around them and put cloth over the structure and put like a heat source, like a light bulb or something. Don't let the leaves touch any plastic.
All right. So we're coming down. We're going to do 3 more questions, everybody. And we want you to post your questions if you didn't get them answered below the video, so we could maybe address them in the future, and we'll do this again. One question is, any new varieties for this season? Give us ideas what you have available at your grove in terms of new varieties.
Oh, there's going to be, I hope there's going to be new varieties. We certainly have added new varieties over the last several years, and there's stuff that hasn't fruited for us yet that is big enough to. There's one there's a couple that we got from David Bird years ago that have never fruited for us, and they've been in the ground for a long time, like JB2 and the so-called stringless Manga Blanca. Deshiri's never fruited for us. It's certainly big enough. Nancy is a variety I got from Gary Zill. Ambrosia. Dolores, those are some Gary Zill hybrids that still have not fruited for us yet. They're certainly large enough to, so if they flower, we'll have the fruit available to sell to the general public. There's I think it's an Indian one called Say Pasala that hasn't fruited for us yet that I would love to try. Gilas has never fruited for us, and it's big enough to fruit. We got some fruit from our Sindri mango last year, which was encouraging, but it was only like 5 mangoes. I'd love to get a full crop from that tree, which is a Pakistani mango that's hard to fruit in Florida. So who knows if those will fruit. Borsha is big enough to fruit for us now. There's a bunch of others, trust me, a bunch that we've grafted over the last few years. A few of them that we just recently added to our list on our website, so you can see what some of those are. Some of them were grafted too recently to expect fruit from this year, but maybe the next year. Every year there's always stuff that fruits for the first time, so it's exciting, and there will be some new names that appear during the course of the season for sure. We probably won't have large quantities of them, but So there'll be some neat stuff.
All right, two more questions. One question is, when are you open to the public? When are you going to start getting mangoes? When do you think mango season is going to start this year and people can start getting it either from your site or come out to your farm?
So actually, I've already sold some mangoes this year, if you can believe that. Here in my hand is a mango that was picked a couple days ago. I was out picking mangoes today. This is actually off-season fruit that occurred on a couple of our Edward trees, but I had enough extra that I sold some to some local customers. But I really wouldn't expect to have a lot of fruit until April, and that's assuming we don't get major damage from this coming cold front. Probably sometime in April, we'll start sawing the fruit locally. When we start getting enough volume, we'll start shipping fruit too. I would fully expect that a lot of trees won't flower until next month after this cold is finished, and then that fruit will be coming in late May, June, July, August. But we'll have a significant spring crop. We'll have a decent amount of fruit in April and May, and we'll be selling that fruit for sure. So you'll have to pay attention to our website, subscribe to our website. We'll send an email out to everybody. We'll probably post on our Instagram and Facebook and stuff too when we start selling fruit. I expect the demand is going to be very high. It just keeps going up every year. So just pay attention. We'll have fruit at some point.
And all those links are going to be below the window, below the video is his website, and all those links are on his website to his social media, his Facebook and Instagram. Definitely get on there. He posts there regularly. I have a sugarloaf tree that had beautiful blooms on them, very colorful, and then they all turned kind of dark. Does that mean I got powdery mildew, or does that just
not necessarily. Very good chance they all came out male. Sugarloaf will do that on its early bloom, especially as a young tree. All the flowers come out male, and then you get no fruit set, and you think you got fungus or something, and that's not necessarily what happened. I mean, it's possible, but I've seen it happen on sugarloaf trees a bunch of times. Just be patient with that tree, Paul. You'll eventually get some amazing mangoes from it.
Yeah, and my peach cobbler for the first time is blooming nice. It looks beautiful. It's nice.
Oh, good. Right. Yeah, that one can be tough to bloom here. So that peach cobbler can be tough. In fact, somebody asked earlier about zoe varieties that are harder to bloom by the coast.
Yeah,
peach cobbler is one of them. So yeah, so good. You got bloom winners.
Yeah, it's great. So all right, last question of the night. What's your opinion about Korean natural farming?
You know, I did a consult for a farm out on the West Coast some years ago that was using that stuff, using those methods, I should say. I don't know really anything about it. I think it's kind of like permaculture type farming from what I remember. I think it can be workable with a lot of crops. I'm not sure how well it will work in the long run with mango because there's a lot of interplanting done, and so I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak to it, but I've seen people using it successfully with other crops, but I'm a mango farmer / tropical fruit farmer, so my methods are a little different. I don't do the drop and chop stuff or whatever that some of those guys use that are following that, but
sure.
That's about all I can say about it. A topic that I don't know much about. So, I have my own methods. So,
yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time. I know you're so busy, and thank you for taking the time to come here and do this Q&A. You answered so many questions. I want to remind everybody on his website, tropicalacresfarms.com. At the bottom, go under the mangoes. He has everything he said is under all his mangoes. That's how he knows all this, because he researched each variety and he's continuously updating them. So thank you so much for doing that. Is there anything you want to share with the audience before we close tonight?
Well, definitely visit our website if you haven't been to it before. Subscribe if you can. Subscribe to our social media too. But if you subscribe via email, once in a while, we'll send out an email. We don't send out a lot of them during the course of the year, but if you want to get fruit from us, it's a good way to find out when we start selling it. And if you are interested in getting a specific variety of mango, a tree that you cannot get, you can't find it in the nursery trade or whatever, you can order it from us and we will make the tree for you and to make sure that you get that variety. No matter how, as long as it's something we grow, we can produce it for you. and it's something you should strongly consider instead of, if maybe you felt like you've been wasting your time looking around for something that's hard to get within the nursery trade right now. You can get it from us. We will graft it for you, save it for you, and we will ship it to you if you want it shipped. And we can ship to California, by the way. So if you're a customer in California looking for a variety of mango tree that you can't find over there, or you want something that's not grafted to a turpentine rootstock, like a lot of the trees that make it there are, you can get it from us. So we're proud of that. Okay, we're trying to promote that. So I guess other than that, yeah, that's all I have to say. Hopefully you'll visit us sometime.
All right, everybody. The link's below the video. Thanks again for watching, and remember, repost your questions in the chat below the video link, and let's get a little board going of people questions and answering them. Until then, everybody, have a great day, and everybody keep growing. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. All right. Good, man. Thank you so much. Let me stop this here.